Okay, thank you, Sherry. I want to thank all of you for tuning in tonight for our presentation, Archaeology Year in Review. Over the past 7 years, I have put together the highlights of what have been found or talked about over the previous year. 2020 has been a very unusual year for archaeology. Some excavations were doing really well, and then they came to a complete halt. The staff often couldn't even work in the lab. The World Heritage Council was canceled for the first time ever, and new excavations were postponed. But still, there were some interesting things uncovered and discovered. But first, my process. The first step is to clip out news articles and copy stories from the various websites during the year. Then in November and December, the process moves to sifting through them to identify what is interesting. There are usually around 50 stories, which are reduced to 7. I endeavor to find and reference at least 2 sources for each topic that is presented. Please bear with me as I struggle to pronounce some of these names. While compiling the information for the presentation, a variety of sources were used. Some of them include Archaeology magazine, which is the official publication of the Archaeological Institute of America. Current World Archaeology, which is a fantastic monthly British publication, and British Archaeology magazine, which is the official magazine of the Council for British Archaeology. Also, BBC History is another monthly British publication with a heavy slant towards British history, and it is also a great guide to what is being broadcast on the BBC networks, as well as what is being exhibited in the museums of the world. Other sources include the newspapers and websites of The Guardian, the Daily Mail, the Washington Post, Reuters, and the Telegraph. The websites of CNN, CBS News, BBC World News, as well as Wikipedia, National Geographic, and Ancient Origins. On each slide, I also mention additional sources for that particular subject. In the past, at this point, we would talk about the new World Heritage Sites that had been added to the list. But the 44th session of the World Heritage Committee was to be held in Fuzhou, China on June 29th to July 9th of 2020. UNESCO released this statement. In light of the developments in the world related to the pandemic COVID-19, it was decided that the 44th session of the World Heritage Committee would be postponed to a later date. So, with that in mind, I decided to add more breaking news topics to the presentation. Let's start with the biggest and coolest museum ever. Described as the biggest archaeological museum in the world, it will house the largest collection of ancient Egyptian artifacts. Over 100,000 pieces will be on display, many for the first time. It will include the complete King Tut collection under one roof, which has never been done before. The museum is located just outside of Cairo in Giza on 5,200,000 square feet of land on the Giza Plateau, a little over a mile from the Giza Pyramid Complex. The timeline for the massive project started in January of 2002, when the Egyptian government announced a worldwide competition for the design of the new museum complex to house, display, and preserve some of the world's greatest ancient treasures. In 2003, the Irish firm, Hennigan Peng Architects, was awarded the contract to turn their ultra-modern concept into the new Grand Egyptian Museum, gem. Construction of the new museum began in earnest in 2005, but monumental delays caused by environmental, financial, and political concerns played havoc with the schedule. Then the outbreak of the Arab Spring reached Egypt in early 2011. Work on the project ground to a halt as the country experienced several years of political instability. Tourism to Egypt stopped during these years, drying up the government's coffers and jeopardizing the grand new museum's future. That changed in 2014 with the stabilization of the government. The project got back on track and construction resumed. The building has a unique shape that is designed to have massive atriums to house the huge statues, such as the 36-foot tall, 3,200-year-old figure of the Pharaoh Ramses II. The building's north and south walls provide fantastic views of the Great Pyramids. One of the main features of the museum is the translucent stone wall made of the alabaster that makes up the front facade of the building. Sorry, folks, I'm introducing people. The new museum is designed to include the latest technology, including virtual reality. The gem will include a children's museum, a conference center, training center, and workshops similar to the old pharaonic places. The old salmon pink Egyptian Museum on Tahrir Square in downtown Cairo will close after the bigger museum opens. Nearly 50,000 artifacts have been moved to the gem already. This year, a new roadblock, the COVID-19 pandemic, has caused the October grand opening to be rescheduled to 2021. Only 19 years after the cornerstone was laid. But entry fees, however, are now set in stone. For foreigners, it will be $25 a person, with 50% off for students. The price for Egyptians is $3.75. A number of excavations in 2020 ground to a halt as COVID-19 spread across the globe. One of the last places to become infected was Egypt. The archaeologists were very busy through most of the year, uncovering 3 different caches of mummies. To start the year in January, Egypt's Antiquities Ministry reported that 16 tombs with 20 sarcophagi, some engraved with hieroglyphics, were found in the Al Gharifa area in Tuna El Gabal, dating back 3,000 years to the 26th dynasty. The site is about 186 miles south of Cairo. The shared tombs were dedicated to high priests of the god Jehudi and other senior officials from the late period around 3,000 years ago. Mohammed Walabala, a member of the archaeological team, said that one of the tombs contained 6 sarcophagi. He said that 2 of them were still sealed and in very good condition. A number of the caskets were made of wood and are well preserved. The ministry also unveiled 10,000 blue and green funerary figures, 700 amulets, including some made of pure gold, bearing scarab shapes, and one bearing the figure of a winged cobra. Painted limestone canopic jars, which were used to store the entrails of the mummified dead, were also unearthed. On September 20th, the Egypt's Antiquities Ministry reported the discovery of 27 sealed wooden coffins buried more than 2,500 years at the sacred necropolis of Saqqara. Researchers discovered the 36-foot deep burial shaft during ongoing excavations at the site. The wooden coffins, adorned with hieroglyphics, had rested undisturbed there for millennia. Saqqara is a vast necropolis about 20 miles south of Cairo. Authorities suspect that the containers, some of which still feature painted markings, have remained sealed since their burial. Egyptian tombs in Saqqara have been subjected to looting and unauthorized excavations over the years, a fact that makes this well-preserved finds all the more remarkable. Also, the presence of 3 sealed niches within the burial shaft suggests that more discoveries, perhaps more coffins, are lying in wait. The finding is one of Egypt's largest in over a century. For thousands of years, ancient Egyptians used the vast Saqqara necropolis to lay their dead to rest. In addition to housing countless treasures in their elaborate tombs, the burial site boasts the step pyramid of Djoser, a colossal structure perhaps best known as the region's first pyramid. The discovery follows a number of other significant finds at the Saqqara necropolis. Which was found in recent months. In April, archaeologists discovered 5 limestone coffins and 4 wooden ones containing human mummies. The burial shaft, stretched 30 feet below ground, was found to contain an array of small artifacts, including figurines, and to aid the deceased in the afterlife. Also found in the tomb was a small wooden obelisk about 16 inches tall that had been painted with descriptions of the Egyptian goddesses Isis and Nefertis. In a press statement, the head archaeologist also thanked the excavation workers for operating in difficult conditions while adhering to the new coronavirus-related safety measures. But wait, there's more. On October 3rd, it was announced a further 59 coffins of priests and clerks were uncovered in August at the Saqqara site, dating from the 26th dynasty. They were buried in 3 40-foot deep shafts, along with 28 statues of the ancient god Seeker. The mission will continue studying their contents before their eventual display at the Grand Egyptian Museum. In case you are not keeping track, that was a total of 110 mummies discovered this year. And now for something completely different. After being delayed due to the onset of the COVID-19, excavation work on an Iroquois village site near Kitchener in southeastern Canada has begun. The archaeologists working for Wood PLC originally anticipated few artifacts to be discovered, but the stage 4 mitigation of the village site has yielded over 35,000 artifacts to date. The site has yielded evidence of several longhouses, ceramics, stone tools, animal bone, and carbonized traces of beans and corn. In addition, a 4,000-year-old late archaic period arrowhead made from material not found in southern Ontario was uncovered. The village has been dated to between 1300 and 1600 CE. Archaeologists on site are operating with a modified protocol due to COVID-19, with the teams of 3 now working separately with masks in order to ensure safe physical distancing. This important measure has slowed the operation down, but not enough to make significant dent in the team's schedule. Representatives of the 6 nations have been working with the archaeologists throughout the process. A little bit about the Iroquois. known as the people of the Longhouse. They are a historical indigenous confederacy in Northeast North America. They were known during the colonial years to the French as the Iroquois League, later as the Iroquois Confederacy, and to the English as the Five Nations, comprising the Mohawk, Onondaga, Oneida, Cayuga, and Seneca. After 1722, the Tuscarora people joined the Confederacy, and it became known as Six Nations. Iroquois people still live in the area, with approximately 28,000 living in or near reservations in New York State, and approximately 30,000 in Canada. Due to the volume of the artifacts found, the archaeological work is set to be completed in 2021. And now to the waters off the Yucatan in Mexico. Archaeologists in Mexico have confirmed that a shipwreck discovered off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula once carried captured Mayans who were sold into slavery. The Cuban-based paddle-wheeled steamboat known as La Union was discovered by archaeologists in the Gulf of Mexico, 2 nautical miles off of Yucatan, near Sicily in 2017. But it took 3 years of research to confirm that it was a Mayan slave ship. Historians estimate that La Union and another steamer called Mexico, both owned by the same company, smuggled 25 to 30 people to Cuba each month between 1855 and 1861. In Cuba, the slaves were forced to work in the sugarcane fields. The illegally sold Mayans were members of the opposition during the rebellion known as the Caste War. The ship sank on September 19th of 1861 while en route to Cuba, proving that slavery continued despite having been abolished in Mexico in 1829. The accident killed half of the crew of 80 and most of the 60 passengers on board. It is unclear how many of the dead included Mayan slaves, as they were listed as cargo and merchandise, not passengers. It took 3 years to map, analyze, and identify the wreck. Archaeologists recognized that the ship's boilers and paddle wheels were a type of technology that dated to the ships built between 1837 and 1860. They also found pieces of glass bottles, ceramics, and brass cutlery amid the wreckage. The next step was a historical detective mission. The researchers searched the archives of Yucatan, Baja California Sur, Cuba, Spain, and Mexico to find a ship that would have been in the area and matched to the description of the wreck. La Union proved to be a match. On to Russia. A mysterious bone circle built 25,000 years ago from the remains of at least 60 mammoths seems to have been too big and smelly to be a dwelling, archaeologists conclude. While glaciers rolled over Eurasia as the Ice Age reached its peak, prehistoric people in what is today Eastern Europe built structures against the desperately cold winds from the material they had at hand, mammoth bones. Archaeologists have discovered the oldest and biggest of the roughly 70 circular structures made of woolly mammoth bones that have ever been found in Eastern Europe. Measuring over 41 feet in diameter and dating to about 25,000 years ago, this is the third structure unearthed at Kostenki, Russia, which is about 311 miles south of Moscow. Many important Paleolithic sites lie in this area, clustered around the Don River. This structure is so huge that no less than 60 mammoths were used to build it, archaeologists reported in the March issue of the journal Antiquity. Mammoth bones are very heavy, and building the circular structure represents a huge investment of time and energy by the humans that built this, but I don't think the structure served as a house, says head archaeologist Dr. Alexander Pryor of the University of Exeter. The other two bone circles found at Kostenki are also large. One was over 30 feet in diameter. The massive structures provide yet more possible evidence that prehistoric hunter-gatherer groups were capable of impressively monumental, labor-intensive projects. The smaller of the bone buildings unearthed elsewhere in Eastern Europe were about 13 feet in diameter. And then there's the smell. Some of the bones that made up the ring were found in articulation. For example, groups of vertebrae, indicating that at least some of the bones still had cartilage and fat attached when they were added to the pile. This would have been smelly and would have attracted scavengers, including wolves and foxes, which is not great if this was a dwelling, Pryor remarks. Moreover, the largest one had few signs of habitation. For instance, substantially fewer stone tools than were found in other smaller bone circles. An interesting idea has come forward. Could at least the biggest of these structures been a Paleolithic refrigerator? Clearly, by the agricultural age, people had discovered storage based on silos discovered in Israel that go back over 7,000 years. Possibly the ancient denizens of the ice were using the robust bone structures as a place to share food, save food, saving meat and possibly other things, the archaeologists suggest. My position is that some of the smaller structures were very likely houses, Pryor says. At Kostenki, our research team has now started a second phase of research that will try to shed further light on the activities carried out there, particularly focusing on the role of food storage at the site. If at least some of these mammoths were hunted, this is going to generate a lot of food from each kill. Therefore, preserving and storing that food could be a really significant part of what humans were doing there. The bigger question is, where would small groups of hunter-gatherers have come up with such a wealth of mammoth bones? How many could they hunt and eat? Pryor suggests that maybe they scavenged bones. This is a huge number to kill, Pryor points out. And maybe they did, he says, but it's worth considering other options too. Side note, when it was decided that this story was a winner, the first image that came to my mind was the Frank Frazetta book cover. Did you see that on the left there, of the mammoth charging through? Frazetta was one of my favorite commercial artists. He did covers for the fantasy novels like Conan the Barbarian, Tarzan, and John Carter of Mars, among others. But I digress, sorry. Now, to the vineyards of Italy. In northern Italy near Verona, archaeologists have unearthed a beautiful and perfectly preserved Roman mosaic floor under a vineyard. The pristine condition of the mosaic has amazed the archaeologists, and they have hailed it as a major find. The floor is believed to have been part of a luxurious villa that was first discovered nearly a century ago. In 1922, the remains of a Roman villa was unearthed in the hills above the town of Negrar della Valpicella. The site was extensively investigated, but was later abandoned, despite the fact that archaeologists believed that there was more to be found. Through the years, there were many surveys of the area, but nothing else was unearthed. In the fall of 2019, a team of archaeologists began to investigate the area again. The team followed up with more digs in October and February, but work was suspended because of the outbreak of the pandemic, as Italy went into a strict lockdown. When restrictions were lifted, as cases continued to fall, within a week into starting work again at the site, they found the floor beneath a row of vines. They're still gently excavating the area, but the photos show an amazing pristine floor and the foundations of the villa. The treasure was found on private property, and the authorities are collaborating with the owner to slowly bring more of the mosaic to light. The town posted on its Facebook page that they are identifying the most appropriate ways to make the archaeological treasure hidden under our feet available and accessible. The mosaic is believed to be part of a private villa that dates to the 3rd century CE. This is a period known as the 3rd century crisis that nearly witnessed the end of the Roman Empire. It was a time of war, economic dislocation, famine, and plagues. Traditionally, it is seen as a period of decay and decline. However, this discovery may show that at least in provincial Italy, conditions were stable and prosperous enough to allow for the production of an expensive and elaborate mosaics in a private dwelling. This discovery may allow researchers to find out more about the villa found almost 100 years ago. To the depths of the Pacific Ocean. It was announced in early May, undersea explorers on the Ocean Infinity's Pacific Constructor, teamed with James P. Delgado of Search Incorporated, that they had found the wreck of the famous USS Nevada. It had been found in 15,000 feet of water, purposely sunk by the Navy in 1948, after a career that spanned 3 decades of service, from World War I to the atomic bomb. The USS Nevada was built in Quincy, Massachusetts, and launched in 1914. Like all USS warships, it had its identification number painted on its bow and stern. Hers was number 36. She had an extraordinary service, spanning 3.5 decades. During World War I, she performed escort duties for the valuable convoys headed to the British Isles. At the end of the war, she escorted the ocean liner George Washington, carrying President Woodrow Wilson to the Paris Peace Conference. In World War II, on July 7th of 1941, in the attack on Pearl Harbor, USS Nevada was the only battleship to get underway, but having been struck by 5 bombs, finally sank in nearby shallow waters. During this action, 60 of her crew were killed and 109 were wounded. She was repaired, re-equipped with guns from the shattered Arizona and Oklahoma, and returned to sea to serve out World War II. The Nevada had fought on D-Day in 1944 off of Normandy, and fought at the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa in the Pacific. After the war, it had been painted orange and used as a test ship at the Bikini Atoll atomic bomb detonations in 1946. The Nevada survived again, but in 1948, the vessel, possibly still radioactive, was sunk by naval guns, explosives, and torpedoes 65 miles southwest of Pearl Harbor. It took the Navy 4.5 days to hammer the Nevada to the bottom. A spokesman for the Ocean Infinity said that their ship, the Pacific Constructor, had been working commercial projects in the Pacific since earlier this year, when they got the call from James Delgado of Search Incorporated. He wanted to know if they would like to team up and look for the Nevada. Their ship had stayed at sea because of the pandemic and was looking for a new project. The Pacific constructor went to the site and marked off an area of 10 by 10 miles and searched with underwater robots. Delgado, who is based in Jacksonville, followed along from his computer and provided historical and archaeological guidance. Last month, as Delgado watched on his computer screen, an underwater robot examined a mysterious collection of wreckage about 3 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Eerie color images of the debris field were beamed from the darkness as the robot scoured the bottom. A target had been identified by sonar earlier, and the robot was moving in to check it out. One part of it certainly looked like the hull of a ship upside down and missing the bow and stern. But was this the Nevada? We went out into the debris field, Delgado said, and spotted 2 other likely objects. They were probably the separated bow and stern. The anchor chain was still there. Then the robot maneuvered around to check the stern. And there on the stern, still painted, was the number 36. Now for some more good news. On October 15th, The Guardian reported that Britain, with the help of the British Museum, will repatriate to Uzbekistan 6 glazed tiles seized by the UK Border Force from a traveler's suitcase at Heathrow Airport. The tiles, which feature Quranic inscriptions and are glazed in white, turquoise, and cobalt, have been identified by an international team of experts as medieval artworks from the Shah Azinda Memorial Complex, which is located near Samarkand. Tiles were documented in 1996 and 2000 during restoration work. Additional tiles from the site are still missing. The man who smuggled them in on the flight from Dubai in January even forged paperwork declaring them as replicas that were made to look old. He produced a receipt that claimed that they had been bought in Sharjah the previous day for 315 dirham, which is about $120. In fact, the tiles were worth many tens of thousands of dollars and are culturally important to the country of origin, Uzbekistan. The made-to-look old tiles have been dated to between the end of the 13th and the mid-14th centuries. They belong to a period that began with the establishment of Canaanite under Shakati Khan, second son of Genghis Khan, in about 1227 and lasting until 1363. Some groups never learn. The Museum of the Bible, which is owned by the Green family that owns Hobby Lobby, was once again in the news for the wrong reasons. It was reported in May 20th that the U.S. federal prosecutors are seeking the return to Iraq of a 3,500-year-old tablet purchased by the Hobby Lobby Arts and Crafts store for display in the Washington, D.C. based Museum of the Bible. The cuneiform tablet is described as stolen Iraqi property in a civil complaint. The complaint details part of the journey of this fragment of the oldest known creation tale, the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet. From a palace library in ancient Mesopotamia to its present location in a Department of Homeland Security warehouse in Queens, New York. It alleges that a major international auction house, unnamed in the complaint, obscured the provenance of the tablet when it sold the tablet to Hobby Lobby in 2014 for more than $1.6 million. The prosecutors said that the 5 by 6 inch tablet is considered the property of the Iraqi government and should be returned. Agents from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement seized the tablet last year from the museum, which, it said, cooperated with the investigation. The Gilgamesh epic is a Sumerian poem believed to have been written at least 4,000 years ago. Sections of it mirror details of the Great Flood and the Garden of Eden stories from the Old Testament, which it predates. A 12-tablet version of the poem, written in the Akkadian language, was discovered in the ruins of the library in a palace of Nineveh in present-day Mosul, Iraq. The Gilgamesh Dream Tablet recounts the hero describing his dreams to his mother, who says they predict the arrival of a new friend. You will see him and your heart will laugh, she tells him. Iraq's Ministry of Antiquities are trying to determine whether the Gilgamesh tablet was among the thousands of items stolen from one of its regional museums in 1991. After Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait the previous year, the regime lost control of certain parts of Iraq. At least 9 of the country's 13 regional museums were looted in the turmoil. The second story has to do with the 16 Dead Sea Scrolls the museum owns and has on display. BBC News and NPR reported in March that a collection of supposedly valuable Dead Sea Scroll fragments on display at the museum have been found to be fake. After 6 months of analysis, experts released a 200-page report detailing how the fragments were forged, likely made from old shoe leather. After an exhaustive review of all the imaging and scientific analysis results, it is evident that none of the textual fragments in the Museum of the Bible's Dead Sea Scroll collection are authentic, said the head of the investigation, Colette Law of Art Fraud Insights. The exhaustive report was the product of a 6-month effort. Dead Sea Scrolls are a set of ancient manuscripts of Hebrew Bible. Most of the authentic scroll fragments are housed at the Shrine of the Book at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. First of the genuine Dead Sea Scrolls was discovered in 1947 in a cave in Qumran on the northeast shore of the Dead Sea, in what is now the Israeli-occupied West Bank. More manuscripts were found in subsequent years. The text, mostly in Hebrew, but some in Aramaic and Greek, have been of intense interest to scholars for their ability to shed light on the origins of the Hebrew Bible and the time period encompassing the emergence of Christianity in ancient Palestine. Their discovery is considered to be among the most significant archaeological finds in history. However, beginning in 2002, some 70 additional fragments appeared on the antiquities market and were eagerly sought by collectors despite doubts about their provenance. The Museum of the Bible's collection comes from this post-2002 lot. The museum purchased 16 of these fragments from 4 individual private collectors. 13 of these were published by a team of scholars in 2016 to provide a comprehensive physical and textual description of the fragments. The analyst wrote, "At the time of the publication, no scientific examination of the museum's scroll fragments had been carried out. Since publication, scholars have expressed growing concern about the authenticity of these fragments. Part of the same collection had already been removed from display after tests in October of 2018 found them to be inauthentic. These earlier tests were ordered after biblical scholars who had examined the 13 of the museum's previously unstudied fragments said that there was a high probability that a number of them were modern forgeries. The museum has removed the scrolls from display." For something light, we had to go to New Zealand. Excuse me a second. For something light, we had to go to New Zealand. During late January, the Lumsden Heritage Trust successfully recovered a relic of New Zealand's rail past when it extracted from the mud of the Southland River an NZRV class steam locomotive. Number 127 was built in England, specifically for the New Zealand railroads in 1885. Along with NZ number 126, they were both dumped into the river at the end of World War I. It seems that in the wake of the war, the value of scrap metal was so low that instead of being sold, old locomotives were dumped into the rivers around the country to act as flood barriers. The trust had been campaigning to retrieve two 1885 V steam locomotives for about 6 years. Retrieving the machines, thought to be the last of their kind in the world, was no easy task. Using water pumps, shovels, hose, chainsaws, a cast of 1,000 volunteers, and a crane, number 127 was successfully lifted out of the muck and placed on a flatbed to be moved to a specifically built siding at the Lumsden Railway project. It will undergo additional cleaning, but there are no plans to restore it. Then on the 26th of February, the trust commenced a second attempt at recovering the other locomotive, number 126. Recovery teams tried hoisting it, but the locomotive was too heavy to lift. Site supervisors explained that the tons of mud had lodged in the locomotive and weighed it down, and it was at this time impossible to recover number 126. They decided to leave it for the next generation to recover. As you can see, archaeology touches on a lot of different times of the human existence, from prehistory to classical to recent. The Oxford Dictionary's definition of archaeology is the study of human history and prehistory through the excavation of sites and the analysis of artifacts and other physical remains. Over the years, we have shown how the archaeological services have been called to investigate the oddest sites, such as the discovery of an illegal whiskey still in the wilds of Scotland, or the discovery of a 1932 MGTC roadster in a trench in a military base in England, or to verify the oldest wine and cheese. It is an exciting field of study, and we are happy to be part of it. And while that, I will try to answer any questions you might have.